Philly.
I wondered about that.
What do you guys think? We're 2 minutes after.
Yep.
Other folks can join as they do.
Okay, yeah, I don't see anyone who's like struggling with audio or anything, so we can go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. I'm glad you guys all made it in here. My name is Angie Nakano and I co-coordinate the Ant Survey with, along with Matt and Marav and our fantastic docent volunteer anters, Jack and Paul, are also helping us coordinate this event today. So we're going to, I just wanted to give you a quick overview on what we're doing, and then we'll get Marav started on baiting. I'll do a brief overview, and then we'll get into the training part. First off, I imagine most of you are familiar with Zoom. If you aren't, I am immensely jealous. But so as you notice, Matt has muted everyone. You feel free to unmute yourselves if you have a question. If you roll your cursor over the Zoom screen, you'll see commands pop up on the bottom, and you can control it that way. But if you aren't speaking actively, please do keep yourself on mute so we don't hear rustling papers and dogs barking and whatnot. There's also a little chat box down there that you can click if you need to ask a question, or if you're having some technical difficulties or something, and one of us can get back to you on there. And then I think that's it for now. I'll let Marav get started on the baiting, and then I'll come back and give you a little overview of the survey for those who aren't that familiar with it, and then we will get started. So go ahead, Marav. I can't hear you, Marav. Are you muted?
You should be all set to share, Marav.
Maybe it's the headset.
Has she turned on her audio?
Yeah, it's on.
I should also mention none of us are professional anything in terms of this.
Yeah, she might have gotten to click the computer audio.
Right, computer audio maybe, not the Zoom audio.
Well, while she's figuring that out, Angie, do you want to pivot to just discussing the survey a little bit?
Sure, I can go ahead. I can give you guys for those of you who are not familiar with the Jasper Ridge Ant Survey, it is, to our knowledge, the longest continuing active project of this kind, where we're looking at the movement of an invasive species into the nature preserve. It was started in 1991 by a grad student in the Deborah Gordon lab at Stanford, and in 2011 it transferred to becoming a citizen science project. So twice a year we take an army of volunteers and we go out. Maybe I'll share my screen here. We go out and see what's going on out in the out in the preserve as far as ants go. There's a brief video here. We'll see if it works, where Matt's narrating. There's no audio on that, huh? Well, I can narrate it. So these are some of the ants in Jasper Ridge. We have about 24 to 30 volunteers a year. We'll do a training to get everyone up to speed on ant ID, go out in the field, show you how to collect ants, show you how to ID them with our support, and then spend a really great half day walking around the ridge and seeing what ants are where. And then this goes into a database, and then we can analyze the movement of invasive species and native species, see what's making a comeback, see what kind of conditions are amenable to movement of ants. So, normally we do this in a classroom, and then we go out in the field. Obviously, because of COVID, things have been affected slightly at Jasper Ridge and at Stanford as a whole, and we were not able to have volunteers on site. But hopefully in the fall, we're hopeful that things will lighten up a little bit, and we'll be able to have you back out in the field. I've got a few photos here, maybe, if Merav is still working out her stuff. So can you see that? Yeah, so this is the training that we usually do inside. We go out on the trails for training, but during the actual survey, you'll actually be out at various points of the ridge, which are not necessarily on trails, which is pretty rare for Jasper Ridge access. We'll go out in teams of 2. You can see some of our intrepid volunteers here are standing on where there's some really visible Camponotus trails. And you have your transect, you have your data sheets and your tablets, and you just help us document what's going on out there. You'll see like ants you probably don't see in your backyard, some extremely large ants, ants doing what they're doing in nature, and it's a very cool experience. And then you'll find that even in your daily life, you'll never look at an ant the same way again. You'll always be wondering what it is, and hopefully we can help share our love of ants with you. I think many of you are already involved in the survey, but if you're not, we'd be happy to have you. You're already on the ant list, or if you're not, send me an email. It's all the spam that you've been getting is from me. You can just, reply back to me, and I'd be happy to add you. I don't know if Merav is almost ready to go here, but we did take a group picture. It's a social event, assuming that we are eventually able to spend time with other people without masks. But obviously this year was a little different. Because of the curtailment of activities coming from the state and Stanford, they only allowed 4 of us to go do the survey for the spring, which was not, it was nice to go out, but it's also not something I would choose to do that many routes individually. We had to go out a maximum of 2 people in the preserve at a time, and wear masks, and it was a very different experience. But at least we're able to continue our data collection, and in the fall we hope to go back to our normal setup.
Okay, just to check, can you hear me?
Yeah, so that's
Yay.
perfect, Rob. I'll turn it back over to you. You can get us started, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, sorry about that. It worked perfectly earlier. So anyway, hi everyone. You can actually hear me now, and now I understand why everybody ignored me when I was saying stuff earlier. Anyway, hi, good morning. Let's get started with baiting. So I don't know if you watched my fancy video, but all you need is a few pieces of paper. I found out that sugar water works best if you have sugar water for your hummingbirds. That's, the ant's favorite. So just, do like a 3-to-1 ratio of sugar to water. Mix it. It could be cold. Just mix it, with a spoon for a couple of seconds, and then place it on the paper. You could put some cookies. You could put honey. I just realized that sugar water works best. So you could just do that, put it on a piece of paper, and then go outside or in your kitchen if you're lucky enough to have ants, like I do. And you could place the bait where you see ants, where you see a trail or next to the nest or something like that. Or you could place your baits. Ants kind of like other insects, they like to walk along fences and, like sidewalks and stuff like that. So you could place your bait in a place like that, even if you don't see ants. In about an hour, we might get some ants there. But I would suggest to make a few, so maybe 4 or 5 baits, and just place them. It takes a couple of seconds. And then, and at the end of the presentation, we'll go back there and see what we found. Okay? Good? Yes?
Yep, I'm gonna go bait right now.
Okay, me too. See ya.
Okay, since while they're going out there, I was going to give that overview now. Now I don't have to. So I guess we have a short pause unless someone has some questions or anything.
Jack, or it looks like there's one question from Perry.
Is there anything is there any advantage to put it in a shady spot or sunny spot, or does it not matter? Does it like dry up and become less effective, or if you put it in the sun?
It shouldn't matter today just because it's not going to be that warm. If it was a really hot day, I'd say put it in the shade because some certain species will avoid direct sun, stuff like that. So
Hey, so I had a question in the chat. How can we contact you to get added to the anting list?
Oh, I'll put my email up in chat.
All right. Thanks.
Great question. Also, we do have a web page through Jasper Ridge. You can just Google Jasper Ridge Ant Survey and you'll find it. It's very out of date, but it does have the basic information in that video that I poorly narrated with the actual audio from Matt on there, along with some links to some of the research that has come out of this project.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So will you let the paper soak, or the liquid will be sort of stay on the paper, or is that okay when the liquid soak the paper when you set the bait?
I think the intention is for it to sort of sit there as a bubble, but if it soaks in, it'll still be attractive to them and it should be effective. But it may not last as long.
Okay, thank you.
I put mine out last night. I thought that's what we were supposed to do, but I think I didn't see the ratio, so I made it too wet, and so I had 2 or 3 ants drown in it, which I felt bad about. I assume if you make it a thicker solution, they can get to the edge without being immersed, and that might help, Jing, with it not soaking in if you have a stronger solution of sugar.
Hello, I'm back.
So 3 to 1. Sorry, 3 to 1 is 3 tablespoons of sugar. One
Yeah.
tablespoon.
Three,
okay.
3 tablespoons of water to 1 sugar.
Oh, okay. Water.
Okay.
3 to 1 is water.
But I mean, ants are not very picky. I just used that because I made food for the hummingbirds and the ants.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Rob, we were just sharing that I had ants drown in it, and Jing was having the water soak into the paper. So we were debating if we made it stronger, if that would help.
Maybe. I mean, again, I just had sugar water from the hummingbirds when I wanted to test the baits a couple of months ago, and it worked very well on just a regular piece of paper from the printer. So, I mean, some of that would get soaked, but some of it stays on top. It's nicer to use honey, but I found out that the ants actually prefer the sugar water for some reason.
Junk food ants.
So I think we're still waiting for a few people to come back, right?
Since there aren't Argentine ants where I am, I'm going to be really curious to see what I end up baiting.
Yeah, you might find something really fancy, Philip, that we won't be able to ID, but we'll do our best.
Philippe, what's your elevation?
I'm at about 6,700 feet.
You're never going to get them. Too cold.
Not at all. I've got lots of ant photos. There are ants all over the place.
No, I mean Argentine.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's wonderful. We actually have some harvester ants that I think are, I think they're a lot like formicas.
Oh, do they look like formicas, really?
Yeah, they really do. And they move a lot like formicas, but they clearly are seed collectors. And in particular, they love to collect juniper berries.
Huh.
Hmm.
Interesting. And you didn't get them identified?
Not yet,
Okay.
but I've got some really good photos.
Yeah, send me some photos. It sounds interesting.
Will
And
do.
yes, and you can use the book.
Yeah. Do you have this book?
No, I don't.
You should get it. The keys are wonderful.
Could you email me the title or whatever it is? Because I can't
It's
quite see it on the
ants.
screen.
Ants of North America.
I couldn't see that. Okay, got it.
But this book is nice because it has this really good keys to genera, to the different genus all around North America. I think it's pretty clear as far as ant taxonomy could get clear, which is not great.
Great, thanks. For the
Great
reference.
illustrations.
Yes.
I think we could probably get started. There's a couple people still out, but I think most of them are ant volunteers, so they've probably heard this presentation before.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Could I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
So I've always, you learn a few things and then you think you know everything, right? And so I assumed that every ant that smelled like the tapenemas was probably a tapenema. But I ended up with a colony of the pavement ants, Tetramorium. I didn't identify them at first. I caught, they're swarming in a pot. I grabbed a few. I looked at them, naked eye. I squished them and I thought, oh, I know what this is. They had a very similar musty odor. Then when I keyed them out, obviously they were not the tapenema. Is that odor something that you've observed with the pavement ants? And is it something that might show up in other ants?
So I think that's really interesting. I would never guess that they would have a similar odor because they belong to a completely different subfamily.
Mm-hmm.
And Tapenoma belongs to a different subfamily with other odorous ants. So
Right.
there's Tapenoma, which is the house odorous ant, or banana cream pie ant. It has all sorts of fancy common names. And another ant in that group is the velvety tree ant, which also smells sweet and similar. So all these ants, they use these chemical compounds for defense. Unlike
It's a formic acid compound of some
So
kind?
they don't have formic acid. That's another subfamily. So there are a few different, or at least 12, I think, subfamilies of ants, but there are a few that are more common. So the ones with the odor use that. They don't have a stinger and venom and anything like that. So they use the smell to avoid being predated. But the pavement ant belongs to a different group.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually actually sting. So they belong to the same group with fire ants and many other ants. It's a very diverse group. And usually they don't smell. So I'm interested. I'll have to go and check it out because I have plenty of them actually in my kitchen.
I can bring one in and hold it up for you.
Yes, and then I could. I'm sure after my microphone worked so well, I'm sure I'd be able to smell through that thing.
Activated the scratch and sniff capabilities. Yeah.
But I do have these ants in my kitchen, so I think it won't be too difficult to go out and check.
Okay,
maybe your ants were out eating banana cream pie.
It's possible. It's possible. I think the lesson here is don't assume anything.
No.
Yes. Yes.
I remember catching a Tapenoma queen and just leaving her in a container for a few hours, and when I took it out, it just the snow just completely filled the room.
So some ants, especially the ones that do produce formic acid, so Camponotus, formica, field ants, and carpenter ants, they produce so much of the formic acid that if you put them in a small vial, they'll actually kill themselves after, you know, about an hour or maybe a bit longer. But anyway, they'll die.
Yeah, well, they can be pretty potent for humans too. I remember a long time ago, before I knew better, I put my pooter tube down at the mouth of a formica nest and wanted to put up a few formicas, and I basically got knocked back on my butt and was gasping for air. It was pretty potent.
Yeah, when I was collecting ants for my PhD, I was complaining to my advisor, and he was like, "Oh no, it's fine. It will just clear your throat. It's fine." Of course, he didn't need to go and collect ants. I did. Anyway, should we get started? Probably we've got everyone by now. So let me share my screen. Okay, so this presentation is built on the regular presentation that we do every year for volunteers. And just like when we do it for the volunteers, I'd be happy to make it into some sort of discussion. So if you have any questions, you know, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them as we go. We'll also have time to ask, you know, maybe general questions or other questions at the end. But if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to ask me. I modified this presentation as we're going to look at slightly different ants today. So unless you're living in a really nice place, you might have more urban species than we see in Jasper Ridge. You might still find some cool native species, but you might also find some of our non-natives. So I tried to incorporate all that in the presentation, but really feel free to ask questions and, you know, let's see how it goes. So, oh, and it's not working. Awesome. Yes, it is. Okay, so that was our bait time, which, you know, this is how it will look like in 40 minutes, hopefully. Very cute. And this is Jasper Ridge, in case you forgot. It's still awesome. And then let's get started. So in Jasper Ridge, we know that there are about 30 native ant species and at least 2 non-native species, mostly the Argentine ant and the Moorish sneaking ant. I don't know how people come up with these common names. Cardiocondyla, which is another non-native. But when we look at Bay Area urban ants, then we have an, I guess, unknown number of native ants, and I'll talk about them later, and at least 4 non-native species that we know about. So we have the Argentine ant and the Cardiocondyla on the right. So these 2 species are found, you know, very common in urban settings. But we also have 2 other species. One of them is the one that we're talking about, the immigrant pavement ant, Tetramorium, which is very common in urban area, but we almost don't see it at all in natural habitats. And I'll talk about that later. And then we also have the crazy ant, fancy name, for a tiny, tiny, tiny ant that is also, as far as I know, only found in urban settings and not in natural landscapes. Okay, so yeah, we could talk a bit about the ants we'll see, then I'll talk about the survey just a bit, and then we'll discuss all these different species, okay? So, species that might be found at home, many people will have Argentine ants. The only good thing about that is that they don't stay there usually year-round, but they have like some activity pattern, which is kind of interesting, that they'll go into your home in the middle of the winter and in the middle of the summer, but the rest of the year they might be gone. And then other people might have Topinoma, and I'll talk about all these different species. So some of you already know all these species, for others it might be all new, but I'll talk about these different ants later. The immigrant pavement ant is mostly outside on the sidewalks, but they might be inside your home, like in my home. Some of us would have carpenter ants. So there's a specific species that like to nest in wood. They don't cause too much damage, but you know, you might have them at home. And then people like Paul might have Solenopsis at home. It's the tiny, tiny, tiny deaf ant that might be found at home. And then outside in your backyard, on your balcony or whatever, and where you go out for a walk, you might find other species. You might find all these different species that I just listed, but in addition, you might find these species. So the winter ants might actually come inside your home, but often would just stay outside. The Calicondata, the more sneaking ants, so the red ones are the non-native ones. And I try to kind of, list them starting with the most likely species to see, as far as I could estimate. And then the crazy ants, the tiny, tiny Nylandria that I mentioned. And then velvety tree ants, which are really, there's some really interesting native species that you might find in like downtown Palo Alto or San Jose or wherever you go. So I actually have a huge nest of velvety tree ants in my yard, which I'm very happy about, very proud. But in Palo Alto, I would sometimes see Monomorium. It's a tiny, tiny black ant. We'll see it later. A Phenogaster, which is actually a rare species in Jasper Ridge, is doing pretty well in some urban settings. And some people like Claire are lucky enough to have big-headed ants, Fedole, in their backyard, which I think is awesome. I'd never guess that this species would make it in a city, but I guess they do. Yeah, and then other species of Camponotus. Yeah, and let's see. So I want to talk a little bit about the Ant Survey, because hopefully, I guess many of you joined us for the Ant Survey, but I'm hoping that other people that are just hearing about it now for the first time might join us next time. So the survey started in 1993 by the Gordon Lab at Stanford University, trying to document the invasion of the Argentine ant into Jasper Ridge. And it's being done every May and September since then. It used to be done by a graduate student that would walk the entire preserve and survey 250 points within a period of about a month in the spring and in the fall, and document all ant species in each of these points. And for about 12 years now, I think, it's been a citizen science project. So we have a large group of volunteers that would walk the preserve in small groups and document all these different species. And it's really fun, so you should join us. We survey the point in around about 20-meter radius around each point for 5 minutes. So we only use one method. It's called visual search, which is actually the most efficient way to look for ants. And just to share with you a few of the slides about the results. Oh, what's that thing? Someone is drawing on my screen. Interesting. Okay, so just to share some results here, you could see all these red triangles. So this is Jasper Ridge, obviously, with the lake, and the field station is kind of right there by the lake. So all these red triangles are where we found Argentine ants. And the interesting thing about it is that 27 years ago, when they started the survey, they saw the Argentine ant in roughly similar areas, so on the boundaries of the preserve, and they thought that they'll document the way that the Argentines will take over the reserve, but it never happened. So they stayed on the boundaries, but we still see really interesting patterns of ant distribution and the effect of climate change, droughts, rainy years, all sorts of really interesting things. When we look at native species, you could see that we have plenty of native species in the middle, and mostly Argentine ants on the boundaries, where, by the way, there are neighborhoods. So these areas that have all the Argentine ants are either near buildings, there are a few houses, and the field station inside the preserve, there's a neighborhood around Jasper Ridge. And we think that that helps support the huge Argentine ant population in Jasper Ridge. Yeah, and then when we look at this map, you could see the ant diversity. So each color represents a different species. Red again is Argentine ant. The blue is the winter ant, the most common native species in our area. And the rest of the species represent lots of different native ant species. So what you can see here, each one of these pie charts represent one survey point. And you can see that usually where we find Argentine ant, it's the only species we find, which is just amazing because they displaced most of the native species. There are a few places where you could find a whole bunch of different species together with Argentine ant, but that's not the majority of places.
What do the numbers represent?
Just the number of plot. So we just, the number of the point.
Oh, I see, okay.
Okay, it's just easier for us. And I'll show you another map in a minute so you'll see the routes, okay? So every year before we do the survey, we do a half-a-day training where we get a wonderful team of volunteers and we give them a similar presentation to the one we're going to do now. And then we look at ants in petri dishes. We try to identify them. We go out for a walk in Jasper Ridge and we try to find as many ants as possible and to show people how to find ants and where to find them. And then we get back to looking at the same ants because it kind of makes sense if you see it more than once. You see it in the presentation, in the petri dish, on the walk, and then again in the petri dish. So it starts to sink in. And it's really fun. We have a lovely group of people that most of you are part of it. And I think it's just a wonderful project. I really enjoy it. And obviously if you're here, you love it too. So this is a route map, which I really like. You could see here, so this is Jasper Ridge. Each point is one of these points that I showed you in previous slides. And these are the different routes. So what we do for the actual survey is that we send a group of 2 to 3 people to each of these different colors, and then they survey all points and record the different species found. We used to do it using an old Trimble. Well, I guess we should say in 1993, they didn't even have that. They had to navigate to each of the points using aerial photos and I don't know what. And then record the ants, and the point was actually marked by a plastic stake. Most of these are gone or not really in the right place. So then we started using the Trimble device to both navigate to the point and also record data. Today we actually use tablets to navigate and record data. And in each of the points that we get, we record what we find. We also use little flags. I don't know if that's clear enough from the photo, but it's a little flag with a little device to record temperature and humidity. So we could use that to learn about the ant activity. And yeah, this is one of the group photos. Philippe, you're here, and probably some other people that are here today. But yeah, every time we have a slightly different group of people, and it's always fun. And now let's learn a bit about ants. So you'd be surprised, but even ant experts would find it difficult sometimes to tell whether something is an ant or not, because ants are so successful that lots of different things try to mimic them. And they look very similar. But one thing that is very useful is looking at their antenna. So ants' antennae are pretty unique. They have like an elbow shape. So that's very useful. And then, can you see my mouse? Can you see this? Yes? Yes?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, so you can see the antenna. Most of them will have eyes. Some of them actually have tiny eyes. But the things that we should look at when we try to identify ants is the shape of this part, the thorax. If we have a petiole and a postpetiole, there's 2 little things. There might be 1, 2, or we might not actually see them, but then it means that there's a little one. And then some of them will have a stinger, as we already said earlier. And yeah, so this is an ant, and they're very cute. So I try to, now we're going to talk about the different species, and I try to put them in 3 different categories. So the first one is ants you might find at home. This is a carpenter ant I had on my mirror in my bathroom. And then the second category is these ants that you might find near your home. And the third one is favorite ants from Jasper Ridge that you probably won't see around your home unless you're really lucky and you live somewhere fancy. Okay, so our favorite ant, is the Argentine ant. Okay, so the Argentine ant is a non-native species. You can see the distribution map, which is pretty cool. So only the green stuff is where it's found naturally, but the rest of it, it's in non-native range, invasive range. It's a highly invasive species that arrived here over 100 years ago and started spreading everywhere. Probably got here with soil on ships or something like that, and then started spreading because the climate here is just perfect for it. And yeah, and it's been spreading ever since. It's very widespread, both in urban habitats, but also in semi-natural habitats, which is basically a natural habitat close to buildings, like Jasper Ridge, like parts of Jasper Ridge that are, you know, perfectly natural landscape, but are close enough to a building that the Argentine ants could get there. To identify them, we use a few different things. So they move very fast, usually. Ants' activity depends on temperature and humidity. So the same ant species, the same nest, could behave differently under different conditions. But they, in general, move very fast. They make trails. So usually once you one ant, you'll see plenty of them walking on a trail. Of course, sometimes you'll see just one walking slowly, and then it might be a bit confusing. But in general, you'll see them walking on a trail in big groups. Around your home, you might find them in your kitchen. You might find them looking for food or for water. And you might have them in your yard, okay? They're pretty annoying. They don't sting, but they might bite. And they might infest your plants. You might have a whole bunch of them. And they displace the native species. So usually when you have Argentine ants, you don't have other species because they fight with them, they take their food, they invade their nests, and yeah, they're kind of nasty. If you have any questions, you know, feel free to ask. Okay, another invasive species is the Cardiocondyle, or the Moorish sneaking ant. So sneaky. So it's another worldwide invasive species coming from North Africa, as you can see in that map. It seems like it doesn't have a very significant ecological impact. So unlike the Argentine ant, that when we get it, you know, in Jasper Ridge, will take over entire habitats and displace everything that lives there, the Cardiocondyle doesn't seem to have the same impact where we see it. So yeah, let me show you this map. So this is Jasper Ridge, and these are the three different very small populations of Cardiocondyle in Jasper Ridge. It arrived, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago. We found them for the first time, and since then we found them in 2 other locations. We think they arrived from the plant nursery that was here. So this is the first population, I think, and then we found this one and that one. But it's not like when you get to that point, you'll see thousands of ants and nothing else. You just see tiny little Cardiocondyle workers.
A question?
Yes. Yes.
So on the Argentine, you had 2 pictures, a big ant and a little ant. Is that male and female? And this one, there is only 1 picture.
Awesome. Great question. Thank you. Okay. So here what we see, this is a queen. The large one is a queen and the smaller one is a worker. Okay. So thank you. If it's not clear, I should add that as a label. That's a great, no, it's a great question. I'll change the presentation. But yeah, so the large individual is a queen and the smaller one is a worker. In this species and in many species, all the workers are the same size. So in the same nest, they all look roughly the same size, the same shape. Other ants might have different categories. So they might have soldiers or majors, we'll get to that. But in this case, they're all the same. Also with this species. So Cardiocondyle, fitting on some honey, by the way, on a piece of paper. So all the workers are, well, they're all very tiny. They're even smaller than the Argentine ant, or maybe the same size. And they're all the same size, all the workers of the same nest.
Marav?
Yes.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So are there significant dietary differences between like the Argentine ant and Cardiocondyle, and that's why the Cardiocondyle doesn't have as much of an impact? I'm just trying to think about not only the physical differences, but if there are significant dietary differences.
Okay, yeah, great question. So in general, most ants are omnivores, so they eat everything they can find. They would eat dead insects, they would eat some plant material. All ants love honeydew. Honeydew is the secretion that aphids and scale insects and other creatures like that secrete while they feed on plants. So they keep secreting sugar water, basically, which ants love. So all ants like that. So in general, most of these species would have similar preferences. I would say that the difference is probably something else. So it's about their ability to reproduce like crazy. Argentine ants would have many, many queens. They make huge nests with millions of workers and probably many thousands of queens, reproducing queens in these nests. And they're very aggressive. So they fight other ants, they invade their nest, they eat them, they eat their brood, the babies. So yeah, I think it's mostly about that and less about the diet, especially because we see that some of the ants that are actually most sensitive to Argentine ant invasion have completely different diet preferences, like the harvester ants. The black harvester ants we have in Jasper Ridge are very sensitive to Argentine ants, and they eat different things. They eat mostly seeds, but also the same food. Okay. Yeah, but interesting question. Okay, so that was Cardiacondyla. And then our next non-native species is the pavement ant. And that's a genus that is not very common here. I think there's a native Tetramorium, but maybe there's none. It's a genus that comes from Africa and probably, yeah, Europe. There are lots of different Tetramorium. And this one here obviously is a non-native. It's an interesting ant. I think, did I show you that cool photo? Oh, you'll see that photo in a couple of slides. So these are crazy ants. So they make pretty large colonies and they fight each other. So often when you walk around town, you know, wherever you go in the Bay Area, you might notice tons of ants on the ground, and usually it will be pavement ant fighting. So they really like fighting each other. Unlike most non-native species, by the way, that usually don't fight each other, and that's probably one of the things that make them so successful, because they fight other ants and not among themselves. The pavement ants, they fight each other all the time. So you see these huge colonies fighting each other, and yeah, on the sidewalk. It's pretty interesting. They have just one queen, unlike most non-native species. And again, it seems like they're not a big thing in natural areas. So we mostly see them in urban settings. You might see them like in a place like McClellan Ranch. You see them along the trail there, where there's you know, pavement, and they have the nests near the pavement. But then you won't see them when you get deeper into that little park.
On the map, what is the difference between the dark green and the lighter green? I understand what the lighter green is. It's native, but what's the dark green represent?
I think the dark greens are places where they were found, and the light green is the distribution map. Does that make sense? So this is where they think they're found, all along that area, and this is like known populations. Okay. Yeah. Okay,
it's just that the key says the light green is native, but it doesn't show a dark green color in the key. So that's
yeah, probably because these are like known or collected populations that were in some reference collection or something like that. It's a really nice website. I could give you the reference later, but it's a really nice website that you could enter a specific species or genus or whatever of ants. And I think these maps are just fabulous. And
great, yeah, please share
that
reference.
Maps. Yeah, so I'll look it up in a minute and I'll share it with the group. Okay, so the crazy ant is another kind of small ant that, you know, you might not really notice at first, but if you start looking at ants in your backyard, which is hopefully what you're going to do from now on, you might find it. I have it in my yard and around my block. I can find them. They usually have pretty small nests. They don't make like huge trails. You don't see like a huge population, but you might see them walking kind of slowly and looking for things on plants and on the ground. It doesn't seem like they go into natural habitats, but there are somewhat common in urban habitats. Okay, so this one and the previous species, we never found them in Jasper Ridge, and even if they'll get there, there probably won't be a huge problem. Of course, there's so many other invasive species worldwide that we might get one day. So, you know, it might get interesting. Okay, and now we talked about the 4 non-native species that I wanted to share with you, and now let's move into some of our cute native species. So this is the winter ant, Panolepis, or the small honey ant, because as you can see here on the right, some of them actually store liquid food in their abdomen, in their gaster. You know, some people ask me why some ants have stripes and some don't, and if these are different species. So in this case, these winter ants, they fed on, I think this is actually honey, and then once they take inside so much liquid food, the abdomen actually gets larger. So you could see the membrane between the plates in the abdomen, and that's the stripes. Okay, and you often see that with Argentine ants and with different species. So winter ants are called winter ants because they like it when it's cold and even wet. Even when it rains, they're out foraging. But then in the summer, they're kind of gone. So it would be interesting if you'll find them in your yard, if you know people put some baits. It will be interesting if to see if they're still active. I saw winter ants in my yard a couple of days ago, so I think they're still out. But in the middle of the summer, they're usually gone till around September when they're back out. So like the other ants that we mentioned, they nest in the ground and they forage on the ground, but also you'll often find them on different plants. So in Jasper Ridge, the best place to find them is on coast live oaks, like many other ants. But also in your yard, you might find them on different plants, on oaks if you have them. And yeah, cool ant. And again, look at this map. It's really interesting because they have such a wide distribution. It's one species that is found from here all the way to the other side.
Rav?
Yes.
What's this ant here that's with the others on your bait trap?
Aha, yes. So there is a little sneaky ant right here. It's not the sneaky ant though, it's a different ant. This is a tiny species of Tetramorium. Not Tetramorium, sorry, Temnothorax. Okay, so we have a few species of Temnothorax that I think I'll mention at the end. This is one of them. And when I saw this one, I took this photo when I was doing my research in Jasper Ridge, or this might be actually on Stanford campus. And when I saw this ant, I was like, oh, there's no way you could find this like ant foraging on the ground. It's so tiny. It's exactly the color of the soil and it doesn't move quickly. So yeah, I felt kind of bad because I thought, wow, I probably missed them so many times when I was doing my surveys. Yes, sad. Yeah, and I could talk about their behavior and all that for a long time, but let's move on. Okay, another species that you might find at home is a carpenter ant. So probably not this species. There are many different species of carpenter ants, Camponotus. This is one that you find in natural habitats, and the map there is just for the genus, not for a specific species. So it says almost 30 species in California. Okay, and in Jasper Ridge we have about 5 different species. In my home I probably have a different species. On my street, maybe the same species, maybe a different one. But these are ants, so they're probably all native, and some of them could do pretty well in your home. They won't make a huge colony usually, but you might have a small colony hiding behind a closet. They don't feed on wood, but they might chew on it a bit to make their nest, and then go out foraging, looking for sugar and for dead insects and stuff like that. What else? So yeah, looking at the presentation. So in Jasper Ridge, they are the biggest ants, and mostly everywhere around here, there would be the biggest ants you'd see. They don't make trails, so you won't see like tons of them in the same place usually. You might see a few if there's a really good food source for them. Another interesting thing is that you see these 2 workers here. They look very different, but these are probably workers from the same nest, the same species. So they are what we call polymorphic. So they have different morphs in the same nest. We used to call them minor workers and majors or soldiers. they don't really defend anything probably. So often there are bigger workers, so they could carry different kind of food or do different tasks. But anyway, in the same nest, you might find different looking ants. Okay, and they're real like honeydew and that kind of stuff. The best way to identify them is to look at the thorax. Okay, the thorax, remember, is the middle section of the ant. And when we look at it, so you need to train yourself how to hold ants with 2 fingers. And then with a hand lens, you could see pretty easily that they have this arc shape, okay? Or what we call one bump or one arc. And I'll show that in comparison with a different ant later on. But that's a very useful thing to do. And then the next one is the odorous house ant, which is a pretty common ant inside homes. It's interesting because it's a native species, but it somewhat behaves like a non-native species in different settings. So in Jasper Ridge, you might find kind of small nests of the odorous house ant, Tapinoma, and they will have just one queen and they won't be too huge. But in an urban habitat, you might find really large colonies with many queens. So their behavior and natural history is even different, depending on their habitat where they're found. So they also have, the workers are all kind of same size. They do make trails. So if you see them walking, you might see, you know, a whole bunch of them. Usually they don't have huge nests again in Jasper Ridge, but in a city they might get pretty large. So you might find many workers, many dozens of workers, I would say. The best way to identify them is to smell them. So you could hold one in your finger, and I can't demonstrate that today, but the way to get an ant is to lick your finger and then, you know, tap it on the ant, and then you can smell. You don't need to squish them. You could gently convince them to, you know, spray their beautiful compounds, and they smell kind of sweet. So that's really helpful because they're very small, black. They look kind of similar to Argentine ants, but then Argentine ants, they don't smell, or at least not good. So, you know, if you try that, that's a useful thing to do. Okay. What else?
Merav, I have
Yes.
a question. If you go back, is that a Prenolepis in with the Tapinomas?
Good. I'm glad I've got all these really confusing slides here. So, you know, to keep you, you know, engaged. So the ants here on the left. So all these little girls, by the way, they're all girls. All these ones are Tapinoma, but this one is different, right? So this is actually Chromatogaster. Okay, and we'll get to that one at the end because this is an ant you usually won't find in a city. Okay, but this is Chromatogaster. So you see the shape is a bit different. Cool. Okay, I have Solenopsis here as an ant you might find at home just because Paul had it at home. And I think I actually had a queen this week as well. So, you know, it's a tiny ant. They're related to the red imported fire ant, the nasty ants that invaded southern US. But these are tiny, they have a tiny eye, and they're not really interested in you. They don't sting or anything like that. They actually feed on other ants mostly. They're cryptic, so it means that they nest underground, but also forage underground, which is why we usually don't see them. They're very widespread. They're found both in the city and in Jasper Ridge. They're very common, but usually we don't really see them. But Paul had them in his kitchen, so you might have them too. Really tiny thing, kind of cute. And then ants in urban habitat. Okay, so all these ants I was talking about so far were ants that you might find at home. These are ants that are more likely to be seen on a sidewalk, in your backyard, in places like that. The pavement ant that you see here should belong to both categories, okay? Because we would see it at home, but it's very common when you go outside. And this is what it looks like when they fight. So yeah, it gets pretty interesting. Okay, so one ant that I think is really fancy, velvety tree ants that we usually think about when we think about places like a natural habitat with a beautiful oak forest. So you might find velvety tree ants there, and they might not be very easy to find. But I've got them in my backyard, and some of my neighbors do too. So they seem to be doing pretty well in urban settings. In Palo Alto as well, there are places that have huge nests that live for a long, long time. So some ants would stay, you know, in the same location for many years. Other ants tend to move their nest pretty often. These ants probably stay there for a long time. There are polymorphic workers, meaning that in the same nest you might have tiny workers, slightly bigger workers, like a whole range of sizes. And they probably have slightly different tasks in the nest. They also smell kind of great, like the Tapinoma, the odorous house ant. They smell sweet. They're related to them and smell kind of sweet. These are arboreal ants, which means that they don't nest in the ground. They usually nest inside trees. So a big oak, or in my yard, they nest in one oak, and then they connect once the nest got really big, they connected that nest to another tree, and then to a third tree now. And they're all connected. Their nest is just separated into a few different trees, but they're all connected. The really cool ants, they're covered with tiny, tiny hairs. And what else? The colors are kind of important to ID, and the smell.
Are they typically bicolored?
Yes, typically bicolored, this species. There are a few different species. In our area, it's mostly this one, but if you travel a bit farther away, you might see different ants. The great thing about the Ant Survey, I think, excuse me, is that if you learn how to identify the ants in Jasper Ridge, you'll be able to identify ants all over the Bay Area. Not all the ants, obviously, but you'll see these ants all over the Bay Area, and you'll see similar ants in other places. So you might see something like, I saw this ant that I didn't know what it was, but it kind of looked like Tapinoma, just different colors. And then it smelled like Tapinoma. So it was just a different species of the odorous house ant. It's just a different species. But they look so similar. Even if you go to Australia, you'll see carpenter ants, you'll see chromatogaster, you know, you'll see some of the species you already know, or the genera that you already know. You'll see them there. And I think that's awesome. But especially in the Bay Area, that will be quite useful. Okay, a phenogaster, surprisingly. So this is an ant that is, I would want to say, kind of rare in Jasper Ridge. They're difficult to find. You usually don't see them. There are a couple of places that we sometimes see them. They have rather small nests. They're not very active. So we often just don't see them at all. But then in Palo Alto, there are a few places where you find pretty large nests. So I guess they could do well, not in highly urbanized area, but like in the suburbs, they might do well, which I think is kind of awesome. And very useful for our ant training when Matthew used to go to different places to get this one specifically from Palo Alto, because it's much easier to find them there than in Jasper Ridge. Another ant that I included in this group is the big-headed ant, Phaidole. And as I mentioned before, so Claire, who is here, had them in her backyard. I think I mentioned that, which I think is awesome. I'd never expect this species to be found in a city, but I guess they could make it. So the big-headed ant, Phaidole, are tiny, tiny ants. They have two different sizes of workers. Okay, you can see the little worker here. They have this big eye. They're really tiny though. I mean, each worker is really tiny. And then they have the majors, which are kind of similar with a huge head, okay? Which is probably not for, you know, huge defense or something like that, but mostly to collect bigger seeds, maybe even crush them. So they're seed-eating ants, just like the harvester ants, but really tiny, tiny, tiny seeds and tiny, tiny ants. And when we look at their nests, we know a few different nests in Jasper Ridge, for example. When we try to find them, it's just a tiny hole in the ground, and sometimes there are a few little grains around it where they, you know, got some seeds out or some dead insects. But they're kind of cute. They might be active during the day or even late at night. So it's it's one of our native species. We find it in Jasper Ridge, but I guess occasionally you might find it in the city as well.
Rob, when I saw them, they were under a rock or under a piece of urbanite, actually, as paving stone. And then the next day I lifted it up, and under there instead were Argentine.
Aww.
But under a piece of wood 2 feet away was the big-headed ants. So
okay.
They're running, they're keeping, and they were there this morning. I unfortunately drowned one in my sugar water.
It might still be okay later, hopefully. Yeah, no, these are really cool ants. And I was surprised to hear that you had them in your yard. I didn't expect that, but I think it's cool. Okay, another ant, which is kind of cool. This is called Monomorium, and we don't include it when we talk about ants in Jasper Ridge because it's not found there. But it's a native species in California, and it's often found by the coast, but it's also found in downtown Palo Alto. So you might have that. It's a tiny, 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 completely black ant. With, I think the nests are kind of small, but yeah, it says here that they have many queens, which is interesting. So most ants actually have one queen in the nest, but this one has plenty. And yeah, and they're sensitive to Argentine ant invasion. So interesting ant, and I don't know, it would be nice if one of you would have it. And now the last category is ants that we find in Jasper Ridge. Okay, and probably wouldn't find, you know, in your backyard or in your kitchen. So one is the harvester ant, and I'm going to go briefly over these ants as we're not going to see them today probably. And if you want to learn more about them, just come to the survey. So this is the black harvester ant, which is pretty common in serpentine grassland. It's very sensitive to Argentine ant invasion, which is why you probably won't see it in, you know, in the city or in disturbed habitats. It's a very large ant, by the way, and kind of hairy and cute. This one is Chromatogaster, or the acrobat ant. They have this like heart-shaped abdomen. Yeah, I need to replace that photo, it looks bad. Yeah, it's not very common in Jasper Ridge, but I mean, they have rather small nests, but you see them from time to time. Small to medium-sized black ants. And the next one is Temnothorax, the acorn ant. These are tiny ants that walk very slowly. They don't make trails, so usually you won't see more than 1 or 2 of them. And they move so slowly that usually you just see them standing there, which is actually useful to identify them. So if you see an ant just standing there on a plant, probably not in your yard, but when you go hiking, and in Jasper Ridge they're pretty common, then it's often this Tetramorion. There are, I think, 4 to 5 species in Jasper Ridge, and many species in the area. They're all pretty small and similar behavior. Well, the Ferrari of ants, we had to mention it. You probably don't have it in your backyard, but it's an awesome ant. The twig ant, Pseudomyrmex, which we were lucky enough to find in Jasper Ridge some years ago, and now we know where she is. We usually just see one. We put it in the aspirator, like we collect it with our aspirator, put it in a vial, look at her, and put her back. Maybe there's more than one. But they nest usually in manzanitas, in holes made by beetles. So beetles use like dead parts of the manzanitas to rear their larvae, and then the ants would use these holes as their nests. They're really cool. They look like a wasp. They're elongated, orange, big eyes, move in a weird way. Cool ant. Another ant you probably won't see in your backyard is this cool army ant, Novermyrmex, which we usually don't even see in Jasper Ridge. But we know it's there because we see dead army ants in the harvester ant nest pile, like where they have the seeds and all the dead insects that they ate. We see these dead ants because they feed on other ants, and they really like to eat harvester ants. So that's usually the only way to see them. Very cool ants. It's a native species. It's just cryptic, so it nests in the ground and forage underground. Oh, and their male is called the sausage ant. Look at that, isn't it awesome? So this is a winged male. And then Formica, I included here at the end of the presentation because it's a very common genus in the area. Usually you won't see it in the city, but when you go hiking in Jasper Ridge or in other places, it's very common. There are different species. Formica moki, like the one here, is pretty common. It's a large ant with large eyes, very long antenna and legs, and the coloring is also typical. They walk pretty fast. They're active when it's hot. Okay, so they'll be outside in the middle of the day when many other ants would be back in their nest. So they'll be out foraging, and they stink. So they spray lots of formic acid. So if you collect them with your aspirator, yeah, get ready for a nice surprise. The best way to identify Formica is to look at them to get like the side view. So you could see the two humps here. And if you remember many slides ago, when we looked at the carpenter ants, they had like an arch shape here. And yeah, let me see if I have that slide. Yeah, I have a slide that will show you both of them. But just before that, I wanted to show that not all Formicas look like that, even though most of them do. Some Formica species look like this. This is Formica subpolita, which looks completely different. And by the way, when we talk about ants in the Bay Area in general, we also have Formica species that look like this, but make a nice big nest, like a mound, the red mound ant, like the one in my picture there in the background. I don't know if you see that poster. That's a European species. I mean, it's a whole mess, but it's based on a European species. But then when you go hiking in Santa Cruz Mountains, you might find something similar, a big mound with hundreds of Formica workers. Very, very cool. Not in Jasper Ridge, unfortunately. And then to compare just for a second, the Camponotus, carpenter ants on the right, and the Formica on the left, the field ant, then you could see the arch shape compared to the two humps. Okay. And then just, yeah, to remind you that in an ant nest, we have workers, but we also have queens, like the big lady right here. And we might have males that always have wings, and we might have winged queens, okay? And then we might have the eggs and larvae and, pupa. So there's like a whole bunch of different things you might find in one ant nest. Yeah, and looking back at this slide, so we mentioned that ants have the elbow-shaped antenna, and you need to look at their thorax, the petiole and postpetiole, if you could see them, and the abdomen. And a few things to keep in mind when we try to identify ants is, are they walking on a trail? Okay, so some ants, like Argentine ants, odorous house ant, winter ants, they walk on trails, and you probably see plenty of them and not just one. Other ants, you'll just see one, somewhere around, unless you're standing on their nest. And then you'll figure that out pretty quickly when they'll start biting you, like field ants do. Do they smell? So ants like the odorous house ant and velvety tree ant, they smell sweet. Other ants might smell from formic acid. The way they move, okay? Some ants move very fast. Other ants move kind of slowly. And that would help us tell what they are. The habitat that you're in. So if you're in the grasslands, you're more likely to find harvester ants. If you're in the forest, maybe you'll find velvety tree ants. The different species that you might expect to see. And then just in a few words, how to find ants. So that's what we usually do after we do the presentation. We go for a walk, and we show people how to find ants. So we look on the ground, because ants could be in different places. So they could be walking on the ground. You might see a nest, but most ant nests don't look like the cartoon, cute little nests, and are very difficult to find, actually. So we don't look for nests most of the time. We look for ants' activity. So we'll see them walking on the ground. We'll see them walking on trees. We'll see them on other vegetation, on rocks. We look under logs. we look at different flowering plants. So we especially look for plants that might have aphids or extrafloral nectaries. And there are some plants that are especially likely to have ants, like coyote brush that has extrafloral nectaries and is very attractive to ants. Coast live oaks and other oaks actually are very attractive to ants. So you might have these in your yard. I guess in a yard, the best places would be if you have oaks, if you have some plants that have aphids, that would be a really good place to look for ants. But similar if you go out hiking. And then there are all sorts of different resources that we could share with you later. There's some online books that you could download, like this one, the first point, and then there's some websites that have good information. So you could look at that. And then, yeah, let's move on to this one. So we shared this document with you last night. It has all the different species, or most of the different species you might find around home, and many of the species you might see in Jasper Ridge. So you could use that. And yeah, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Rob, there's a question in chat.
Yeah.
It says, in the summertime when everything is dry, should we be looking for ants in places different than in other seasons?
Cool, that's a good question, because we do change the places where we look for ants depending on the season. In the summer, the coast live oaks are still the best place to look for ants. You won't have all the, like the spring plants that might have aphids. Those would be gone. Summer is not the best season, but it's also not the worst. So ants are still pretty active. I would look at coyote brush. I mean, not in the city, but like in a natural landscape, I would look at coyote brush and coast live oak mostly. Okay. Other questions?
So I was hearing that you're saying you can find some of these same species, like, all over the world. Like you learn the ant here, you can find the same thing in various places, and they're not always invasive, like they're native in all these places. Does that mean ants evolved to, what they are, close to what they are today before, back in the days of Pangea and all that?
Yeah, so I tried to correct myself because I think I wasn't clear. I said species and then I corrected to genus. So you might find the same genus here and in Australia. Okay, so the chromatogaster that you see here, if you learn how to identify chromatogaster, you will find it probably, I guess on all continents, but I'll have to check that out. But yeah, not the same species. I don't know if there are species that naturally have this really wide distribution, but definitely genera. Okay, so Tapinoma is found here and in the Middle East and in probably lots of other places too, but not the same Tapinoma. Okay, so sorry about that.
Thank you.
And maybe let's change to this view. Awesome. Yeah, any other questions?
Marava, I have a question about,
yes.
Our least favorite ant, the Argentine. We always talk about it as if it's just one species. Is that true in the Bay Area or spread? I mean, it has this global spread, but obviously there's multiple species of Argentine. What about locally?
So the Argentine ant, it's one species that's spread worldwide from South America to many places with Mediterranean climate, and it's the same species. They're really interesting. They're called super colonies, which is probably not the best term, but they don't fight other Argentine ants. So there was this really interesting study years ago about a huge colony of Argentine ants in Europe that would not fight. So you could take ants from, I think it was like from France and ants from Spain, and they wouldn't find each other. So they said it's like one huge super colony, and that wasn't very accurate. But the interesting thing was that they wouldn't fight. But if you take ants from a little area in Catalonia near Barcelona, they would fight the rest. So, just like the real political issues in Spain, they felt like we are different. So yeah, anyway, it's an interesting study. Anything else? Okay, so what's next? Should we talk about abates and go and look for them? Okay, so some of you went out to place your baits, and then now they should be ready. I mean, we'll have a look and see what they look like. Hopefully we got some ants. I suggested that we'll use baits because I think it's just a really easy way to find ants quickly. We don't want to spend 40 minutes outside now. We just want to spend a few minutes to look at ants. It's a good way to attract them from wherever they are to where you want them to be, but also it's a really good background for photographs. So it gives you this nice contrast when you see them with a white background. You could easily take a photo, and then also they just don't move much. So if you try to take ant photos with your phone, it might be slightly difficult, but once they're, you know, stuck there eating your sugar water, makes it much easier. So if there are no other questions, I would say you could go out and look at your baits. Try to get closer. I mean, first take a photo of the bait if it has something on it, and then get closer and closer and take more photos as long as it's still in focus. And if you have an option for manual focus on your phone, you could use that and get even slightly closer. But even with just a regular smartphone camera, you can get pretty nice photos of ants this way, and then we will share these photos later. Okay, so once we'll come back in about 15 minutes or so, or 10 minutes, we will share our photos in small groups and see what we found and try and help you identify what you had. If you didn't place any baits, you could just join me and have a little walk in my front yard and see what I got. Hopefully I did get something interesting.
A quick question.
Yes.
Since my attempts of using the smartphone to photograph very tiny 2-3 millimeter ants isn't successful, is there a preferred or recommended macro attachment to most of the cell phones?
Yes, my favorite question. There is. So yeah, I really like using these smartphone macro lenses. So this one is called Ulanzi. I could, you know, write it down for you guys later. There are a few different ones, but this has 2 different macro lenses, and it works wonderfully for ants and other little things. I like the fact that it's a shift on lens, so you don't need to clip it on and find the exact location and play with it. You just have it all the time there, so I don't lose it, which is also great.
Marav, could you spell?
Yes, I'll write it on the
okay,
in the chat. So just a second. And then there's another one called Shift Cam. So this one. The other one is Shift Cam. Yeah, awesome. So they're both like the same thing, and there are probably other products. These are the ones that I've used. Awesome thing. I have a fancy camera, but I usually just use this because I get great photos using that. So how about I'll try and call you guys with my phone.
Oh, Marav, before you do that, by the way, on the cameras, some of those lens attachments only work on iPhones and fewer work on Androids, right? So in general, if you have an iPhone, you're probably in better shape, but there certainly are some for Androids, right?
Yeah. Recorded.
Is there a certain magnification that seems to be most successful?
It could probably honestly just depend on what you're looking for in the ant and how close you want to get.
Okay, yeah, let me take you outside and hopefully we got some cool ants. אני באמצע פגישה, אני לא יכולה. Okay.
Okay, Marav, we can hear you, but we can't see anything. In any case, if you guys have baits to check or want to take pictures of ants, you can do that now, and we'll assume we'll come back in about 10 minutes, or you can stay on
okay,
watch,
Angie.
Marav. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, awesome. So it's working. Nice. Okay.
Yep, and then she froze.
Oh, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so this is just using the regular camera on my iPhone, and now I'll switch to my awesome lens. So you have to get really close to use that. And yeah, let me try and magnify.
If you guys can't see her very well, you can switch to speaker view on the on your Zoom. That's the top right.
Okay. So yeah, so these ants are velvety tree ants, okay? And they made like a little trail here. Let's switch back to the regular lens. So you can see that there's a little trail coming to the bait. And then I love the way that they circle around the sugar water. I guess they don't really like my cookie. So often they'll, yeah, too bad. My kids don't like it either. Well, more for me. But yeah, often they'll kind of circle around their sugar water or honey. And then later on, they'll take care of the cookie, but they just prefer that. When I did my research using baits, I actually used tuna fish and honey. And the tuna fish is very attractive to ants. They love that. But, you know, if you don't have to use tuna fish, it's kind of nice not to. But it's the best bait. And it's nice to use a few different kind of baits because some ants would prefer the sugar, some ants might prefer the protein, some ants actually prefer oil. So in the tropics, when I used baits, we would just take like tissue paper and put some oil on it. And that was really attractive to ants. So let's see, let's check our other baits. I think they might all have the same thing. So I tried to place a bait here next to this little wall. Oh, hopefully you won't hear that noise. So yeah, but nobody used it, but it's like along this little wall because, can you hear me or is noise too much?
We can hear you, but your video is frozen.
Oh no. Okay. Thanks, Paul. Is it okay now?
It's frozen and out of focus.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just stay here for a second and see.
Yeah.
Gets better. Is it working now? Can you see it?
Still frozen.
Oh no. Okay, so let me try and change my internet.
Ah,
yeah?
Working.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can actually see you now.
Yeah, I now
okay.
see the trail.
Okay, so yeah, so this is another trail of the same velvety tree ants. They all come from the same huge nest. And you can see here that there are different sizes of workers, okay? So all these ants, as far as I can see, are all velvety tree ants. Let's use the lens again. So these are all velvety tree ants.
Nice.
Even though some of them are kind of small, some of them are much bigger, and there's like a range of worker sizes. But I was kind of cheating because there are already lots of velvety tree ants here before I placed my bait, because they found something dead here, some dead insect.
Okay, you see it? So most ants would love to eat dead insects. They usually can't get them. They can't kill a living insect usually, but most of them would be happy to eat a dead insect. It's a really good protein source for them.
Marav, can you explain for a beginner how you would know that you were looking at a velvety tree ant versus another?
Yes, yes, I'd love that. Yeah, so just a second, let me walk you to the, well, you know what, we could actually do it here. Let's do it here. Okay, so when we look at these ants, unfortunately, I think we'll only see one species, so I won't be able to explain how to compare this species to others. But when we look at these ants, so the size, this is actually pretty large for an ant. I would say 4 to 5 millimeters, which is, I have no idea what in inches, some part of an inch, whatever, but 4 to 5 millimeters, I guess, depending on the worker. They are kind of, they're not shiny, okay? So an important characteristic for ants is whether they're shiny or not. So these ants are never shiny because they're covered with tiny little hairs, okay? We look at the colors. So they're grayish on their head and the abdomen, and the middle part is reddish, brownish kind of thing. And let me get one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lick my finger to get one ant. And it's not going to be very happy, but it's a very useful thing to hold it with 2 fingers like this. And then you can see, so just a second, let me get a better hold of it. Because it wasn't happy for some reason. And it tried to escape. Yeah, so if you were in the field, I'd let you smell the ant, which is always the best. For these ants, again, because they smell so nice. And because most ants don't smell, or at least they don't smell sweet. Okay?
Excellent.
Yeah, so can you see, get a clear view? Because I can only see like a tiny picture on my phone, so it's difficult to tell. But I think it's in focus, and well, you can see it's trying to
A little further out. Just a little further out would be in focus. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's getting better.
Awesome. So yeah, so you can see the abdomen and the head. Well, the entire body is covered with tiny hairs. So that's what makes them not shiny. Because other ants, many myrmidine ants, the ants that are kind of round and they have less hairs and then they'll be very shiny. But this one is not. Another thing is that their eye is not very large. Because I used to kind of mistake these ants with formica, with the field ants that have similar colors. But then this one, the velvety tree ant, has much shorter legs and antenna and a smaller eye compared to formica, okay, to the field ant. And also they don't run very fast. We did see them walking on a trail, so that's useful. We saw that they have a few different sizes, so like a range of size. And yeah, and we see that they're kind of slow. And if we'll follow them, we might see their nest. So let's try and do that. And also, oh, and one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a photo, so you probably won't see anything for a second, because I want to share that with you later. And also with maybe the rest of the group that went to check their baits. So I'm going to take a couple of photos. And I'll also be able to show you what it looks like in my different lenses. Because someone was asking about the magnification earlier. So we could talk about that. So just a second, just finish with one more photo. Okay, awesome. And now let's get back to Zoom. Okay. Can you see my video now? Not yet? Yes?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Oh no, the wind blew my baits. So I placed a couple of baits here, but gone almost. So I'll just try and keep them here for later so I could pick them up. But this is my coast live oak. And it has a nice little hole where the ants live. I don't see too much activity inside now, but there are a few workers here. Depending on the time of the day, they might be really active, and sometimes there are like hundreds or even thousands of them out. And let's see who's here. Now, another velvety tree ant. That's a different bait. But they just took over this entire area. So I don't know if you could see them, but they're foraging on the rocks here, looking for insects. Oh, this one is taking the cookie. Yay. Okay, I'm glad someone likes it. I could share my cookie with them. And let's see if I had more baits. Oh yeah, there's one here. Ooh, exciting. We got someone else. Look at that. So can you get a clear view?
Still out of focus.
Out of focus?
Pull back
Okay.
a little bit. Pull back, back.
Oh, let me put my lens then.
Oh, okay. There you
Yes.
go.
Yeah, so
Ah,
that's with the macro lens. So any guess?
a phenogaster.
No,
No,
unfortunately.
pavement
Tetramorium.
ants.
Yes, Tetramorium, pavement ant. So this is one species we can't find in Jasper Ridge, luckily, I guess, but is pretty common here. So this is the pavement ant, and they also like my cookie. Awesome.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, they're excited about the cookie. By the way, this is a really great activity to do with kids. My kids really enjoyed feeding recipe. Yes, I'll share the recipe later. It's in Hebrew, unfortunately, but you'll figure it out. It's pretty easy. So it's a really fun activity to do with kids. My kids who are really not interested in what I do, were really enjoying feeding the ants and watching them and bringing them more food and stuff, and sharing my cookies with the ants. Yeah, so let me take a couple of photos so we could share with the group later. So just a second. Because I think it's quite amazing how well you could see them with just this little macro lens. Yeah, unfortunately I can't switch cameras. So on this iPhone, I actually have three different cameras. And then when I take photos on my camera app, I could change to a different camera and a different macro lens. And then I have like a really nice magnification. So I'll share that with you in a minute. As just the photo itself. I don't think I could do it now. Because, oh, you know what? Maybe I could actually share a screen. Just a second. Let's see if we could do that. Screen. Yeah, hopefully it won't destroy everything. Microphone on. Zoom. Okay, could you see my screen? Is it actually working?
No, it's not.
No? Okay. Yeah, I was getting too excited here. No. Okay. So anyway, these are the ants. And I think this is it. So not too bad. We had two species because these velvety tree ants kind of took over here. I have also winter ants and sometimes some other species, but I don't think we'll be able to see them now. So did anyone else get anything on their baits?
Yeah, I got some.
Yeah? Oh, awesome. What did you get?
Pretty much just Linophythema, but I got some nice photos though, so.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let me get back to my desk.
Barav, do you know if you use those lenses with your iPhone, if it allow you to use apps that shoot in RAW?
We lost audio for Marav again.
Rob, your audio's off.
Yeah, I think she's probably switching from phone to back to her desk mic. So.
All right, I'll
We're
wait.
so ambitious.
But to answer your question, Philippe, I don't believe that as long as the software is letting you shoot RAW, the lens shouldn't be an issue at all. Because it's just an overlay. It's a physical lens that goes over top of your regular iPhone lens.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because one of the apps I've really come attached to allows you to manually focus and to do other things. And so I didn't know if adding a lens over that lens might prohibit it working properly.
Yeah, I'm not sure what software Marav was using. We could ask her about that if she's manually focusing at all.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Okay,
Awesome.
so Rob, so here's my question. On the lens that you put on a smartphone, I use an app that allows me to shoot in RAW with my iPhone. Does the lens create any problems for doing that?
No.
Oh,
I do the same thing. I have
okay,
the
great.
option to use RAW.
Great.
And I think it's good because usually in that kind of app, you'll have an option to use manual focus.
Exactly.
Which is very useful for macro shots. So.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so who else had ants on their baits?
I have a question. So I took a couple pictures, but I don't know how to send them in to you or show them.
Okay. So Matthew, do you want to break into groups? Are we waiting still for people? What should we do?
You know, I was, depending on how many people actually got ants from the traps, I was wondering if we just shouldn't share as a group right now. And I've opened it up so that everyone should be able to share your screen. So if you're able to get the photos onto whatever device you're accessing this from, you should be able to share them that way.
Okay.
I've got some photos ready to go.
Great. So I think let's just go one at a time. So John, if you have some to go, why don't we start with you?
Okay, cool. Here, I'm sharing my screen now. Here is some, what I believe to be the Linnepathema. And only one visiting a couple of the traps, but I got some nice groups. Let's see if I can zoom in.
Wow, awesome photos. But I think that's what I love about these baits, that it's just so easy to see the ants on the white paper.
Yeah, I love how long the antenna though. I have a Linnepathema eye, they're almost a body length.
Yes, so if we're thinking about ID, then we see that all these ants, they roughly look the same size, right? I mean, there's one actually here that looks slightly bigger, but they're mostly the same size. They're slightly shiny, they have very long legs and antenna, and they're rather small ants. We can't really see the color here, but Argentine ants are kind of dark brown to dark brown, but not black, which seems okay. They have rather small eyes, or maybe medium-sized eyes, and there are plenty of them, okay? Because often you'll just get one of that species and maybe one of a different species or a few, depending on how long you let them, forage to the baits.
Well, and you can see some of them have swollen gasters, maybe from sucking up all that liquid, which is something you would see in velvety tree ants, but then also in the Argentines as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But then
sometimes
they have these stripes.
Fun to put food coloring in there and watch the trails taking the color back.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you could actually see if they share resources, right? Because you could feed one Argentine ant colony with blue colors and then see where it gets. Because the thing with the super colony is that they're supposed to share resources. So you could see if they actually do that. And that's how they do the research.
I used to get odorous house ants here, but that was a year or two ago, and I haven't seen them since. So I'm not sure if they were completely displaced by something, but.
Yeah, I wonder about that now that you have Argentine ants.
Yep.
That could be a problem.
Cool.
Awesome. Anyone else would like to share some ants?
Shall I share?
Yes, please. And
Okay.
then I want to show you some of the photo I took now, but yes, please, Paul.
Take me a while. All right. Where is it? Huh.
So maybe while Paul is looking for his photos.
Looks like Kim's got some too on hers.
Oh, here it is. I found it.
Oh, cool. Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is 2008. We had a colony of the tramp ants that was sending out its alates, and you see Argentine ants all around this, the larger, darker ants. That was what attracted my attention to this. There was this mass of Argentine ants all focused on this one area, and they were acting really strangely, you know, very, very agitated. And then I found the winged queens and males coming out. Next picture is 2013, same area. They had declined tremendously. Now you can still see the Argentine ants around them. And here are just a few ants. This is Prenoleptus doing a very strange behavior. They would mine out the buds of a rose. And we tried to figure out why they were doing this. Somebody suggested there were insects underneath here that they were getting the sap from. So I sacrificed a bud about a month ago, knocked all the ants out, no insects. Still don't know what's going on. This is the Solenopsis queen.
I have to mention, I have that exact same phenomena here in New Mexico, and I took some photos of it. But yeah, ants that just love those buds, and I couldn't figure out why they were there.
Do you know which rose?
No, I don't, because it's a new house we bought, and so there are rose plants that are already here.
Because it's only one rose varietal that they do it to in our yard, and we don't know why.
I wonder if there's like sap coming out of the bud or something like that, because that's often what the ants are for, you know, looking for sap.
Yeah, well, when I took it out, the bud edge was all brown, like it'd been damaged. And I wondered if that was what they did, is they found a damaged one and then they started damaging more of them. And of course, all this nice sweet sap coming out.
Maybe if they chew on it, the sap comes out?
It probably, I mean, they continue to mine it down. So if they keep damaging it and removing it and damaging more, that would make that happen. So
cool.
This is the Solenopsis queen on my bathroom, not my kitchen.
Sorry about that.
Picture of her sideways, so you can see really close. By the way, almost a sausage there too. And another picture of her. One thing you didn't mention is that some ants are very busy at night. So this is in Edgewood after dark. These are the alates coming out of the carpenter ants. And the trail for this group was huge. You see there's different size workers here. But during the day, you would only find the small entrance holes to the colony. No evidence of ants except for the cleared trails. At night, they were absolutely loaded with ants. And Jack will remember this because he was the one that pointed it out to me as we were going out for a night hike, getting ready to do one for other people. This is another kind of bait you can use. These are chromatogasters eating the remnants of a coyote's meal at Jasper Ridge. It left a piece of a rabbit's leg there, and they just were covering it. And Marav, this is a really tiny ant here. Have any idea what it might be?
Are you able to zoom in at all?
Oh, sure. Gets out of focus pretty quick. It's about as good as it gets.
Wow, it's really tiny.
It's
It's a mimicry
about a
for sure,
millimeter
but
and a half.
I
And there
wonder
are a
if
bunch
it's
of,
that monomorium that I showed you, but it just doesn't look black enough. It looks kind of
well,
brown.
that's what I was beginning to think it might be, but I wasn't sure they were that tiny. And all of these were
They're very
tiny.
small, but this one looks, I don't know if it's black, but maybe it's just the photo.
It's pretty black,
Okay.
pretty dark.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
So
good.
maybe-
I thought that's what it might be, but this is a carpenter ant, more what you see during the day, not at night. This I found the chromatogasters were releasing their alates in October 22nd. Go away. Yeah. That was not supposed to block that. Anyway, the chromatogasters were coming out in October 22nd of last year. And Philippe, this is one you might see in your area. Remember how we were told that ant entrances cannot be round? Well, I found this and thought, well, what the heck is this? It was just in Baker, Nevada, almost on the border with Utah.
Near Great Basin National Park.
Yes, we were staying at a place, a trailer in Baker, and I found this hole and thought, oh, what's doing that? I'll come out at night. And it was lined with ants. And wish I could get the name on it here.
I wonder if the hole was made from another organism. They simply adopted it.
No, this is actually, I've looked it up. This is the hole. And the name of the ant is a, oh, come on.
It's at the top.
I know it's at the top, but I can't see it. There it is.
Myrmecositis mexicanus.
They're honey
I was
pots.
able to identify it with my book, and it's one of the honey ants. They live underground. They come up only in the darkest part of night. You have to wait till it's really dark, and then you go up and you'll see them. And they're translucent yellow ants. You'll love them. I'm sure you'll find them. They all have this decorated hole. It's very, very distinctive.
That's very cool.
It is. Also, I wanted to advertise for those who have not been on the ant survey, ants aren't the only thing you see. This is a larval form of our firefly. It's an adult, doesn't look like one, adult female, and at night she just sits there and glows. Saw this on the same place, this parasitic wasp with a nice long ovipositor, and a bee assassin. So you see lots of stuff on the survey. Can't say enough about going off trail and seeing things. Next.
So my baits didn't attract anything.
Oh no.
But I do have two photos I can share of two different ants that I recently caught in our yard, if you're interested.
Okay, Philippe, if you want to do that, you can. I do have in chat, Christine Baker said she has some photos, and then I was also sent some photos from Michael that I can
Absolutely, absolutely, I'll defer.
Yeah, I'll try to do that, share, and then I want to share desktop, and then let's see if I find my, okay, here we go. Can I share a video too? Or, okay, so let's see, I'm going to do this. I hope it's good enough. Can you see it?
Not sharing screen yet.
Oh, okay. Share.
Share screens on the bottom screen.
Yeah. So, my first time sharing my screen. So, I'm going to the share button, right? And then, oh, do I go to share? What do you want to share? So I'm going to do desktop. And then I'm going. And I go to Google Photos. Is it working yet? No?
Did you click OK after selecting desktop?
Yeah, just in fact we want to share close of the screen. Okay, that.
Okay, it's going.
My husband. Can you see it now? Okay, yeah. So, is this visible enough? Okay, so that's what I found in my bait. Let's see. Is it sharp enough? I'm sorry. It looked really good when I.
No, it looks good. How large are these ants?
I would say medium, like maybe, I don't know, 3 millimeters.
Oh, I thought I was feeling something on my face. I have a velvet tree ant on my neck. I think they look kind of like a pheanogaster to me, which is awesome. I mean, your ants, Kristen.
Yeah. And I'm trying to get to the next picture. I had 3 baits and I had different ants at the okay. I'm sorry. I'm not very technological. I took so many pictures. Yeah, I'll go. I think I had pavement ants too, but I don't know how to go to my next pictures now. Sorry about that. Hey, Brian, can you get me to my next photo?
May I suggest you stop sharing and start sharing again, because I think you got to a different screen.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I just want to go. Okay, here my photo. Okay, here. So I'm going to go back to share, right, and then to desktop, and then I click on the desktop, share, go to my photos. Oh, what is it doing?
We got it. We can see it.
We can see it.
We can.
Okay.
Now
we could see it. Now we can't anymore.
Okay, and now, oh yeah, I got it. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to the next. Take some more photos.
There, it's showing now.
Is the same or? Oh, it's video. Oh, here we go. These are, I think these are definitely under my walkway, driveway. So I was thinking that they might be the pavement ants.
They look, no, I don't think they're pavement ants. I'm not sure what they are. But
it looks like a
yeah, they kind of look like a pheanogaster.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, so that's what I got for you guys.
Well, that's really cool.
In the cooler season, I know that I had the winter ants, lots of winter ants. But I don't see them right now. I guess it's too hot in my backyard.
Yeah, they might be gone for the summer. You know, took off to Tahoe or somewhere.
All right. Thanks for looking at my ants.
Well, thanks for sharing. A pheanogaster is really awesome.
Jacob, did you want to show photos?
I have photos as well.
Yeah, sure. Can you see them now?
Yes.
So this is a colony of Phaenogaster occidentalis, which I found in my backyard. There's 2 queens here, and you can really only see the 1 queen here, but I have them tubed up, and I'm raising them as a colony right now. Over here, this is a picture of Cardiocondyla maritanica that I found yesterday when I was digging around my backyard. And sorry, my screen's frozen. Hold on. This was another picture that I found of them. And this was just an Argentine ant that I found yesterday as well. And I also keep a lot of colonies in my home. So this one is a picture of Camponotus hyati colony that I caught the queen this year, and right now she has around this many number of workers. This is a Camponotus semitestaceous colony. And these are my Camponotus fragilis, which are desert ants, which you can find them in Southern California. And these ones are a lot more light colored because they're callows. This is what one of the majors looks like if you have a close-up over here. Hold on, let me see if I can play this video. This is just a video of their brood pile and of them inside their nests. They have a few hundred workers right now, and I'm expecting them to increase in population by a lot very soon, since they have around double the number of workers in brood. So this is Camponotus vicus, and this was her 2 weeks ago, and now she has workers already. And yeah, this is another semitestaceous photo. Oh, these are Formica francouri that I have as well. Yeah, so that's what I have.
Wow, it's awesome.
Those are
Beautiful
spectacular.
ants. Yeah, beautiful
Nice
photos
profile
and
access
great
video.
ants.
Wow.
So what are you using to raise these? What kind of food?
Well, you can see here they're feeding on a roach. I was recently able to get a roach culture or a colony, and I've just been raising them, and I feed off the nymphs and the extra males every once in a while. So yeah, that's what they've been feeding on. Hold on, I can get another picture.
I liked your light-colored formicas.
Thanks. This is just a liquid feeder, since I have so many colonies that it's just easier. You can fill them up with liquid. Here I was just playing around with food coloring, which is why it looks all weird, but I have some hummingbird nectar in here, and you just place it right side up with the plastic part sticking down, and they drink from it. So it just makes the process a lot easier.
Very cool.
Yeah. Amazing.
Awesome.
Okay, if Michael is still on, I'll share his pictures, and then we will try to get everyone wrapped up in a reasonable amount of time here.
Yeah, I think Edward wanted to share, and I've got a couple of photos to share.
Yeah, so if Michael's there, I think these are monomorium.
Yeah, they kind of look like it. So yeah, you could see a few queens and workers in here.
Yeah, I don't know if he has anything to say, but if not, then we can go to the next person.
Okay, so Edward, did you want to share something?
Yeah, sure. I accidentally had my photograph on earlier. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I accidentally hit share, but I can open up my Photoshop page and show you some of the, I'll hit share now. Hopefully that'll work. Do you see my screen at all? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is one of the ones we got to debate. And it's of course blurry. And then what we got Sun and Better Sun. Couple things, probably pavement ants, and then this might be a small honey ant.
It looks kind of brownish. So how small was it? Yeah, it looks like pavement ants, and then this one might be actually the crazy ant.
Oh.
Because it's so brown.
Cool.
So the way to tell is to look at the weird hairs that they have. They have these really long antennae like this one, and the colors look okay. They're much smaller than winter ants, which this one seems like. I think winter ant should be around the size of the Temnothorax, the Tetramorium, the pavement ant.
And this is not. This is much smaller.
But, yeah, it's much smaller. But then it could also be like a small worker of winter ants. So, you know, when you have a fresh new nest, the workers are smaller because they didn't get enough food as a larva, so they stay small.
Oh, okay.
So sometimes you'll have smaller workers. If you, next time you see them, you can try and take photos from like a profile view and see if they're really hairy, and compare that to photos of the crazy ant. And then
So this one was on a passion fruit vine.
Mm-hmm.
We have that has nectaries on it right now.
Cool. Yeah, so this one is kind of brownish too, but I would guess this one is actually a winter ant because you could see how the abdomen, the gaster, is like a teardrop shape from a side
Mm-hmm.
view. I think, you know, so having side view photos of ants is always awesome because you could see different characteristics of having both like picture from above and from the side.
Can't do that when you're using the bits.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you could try actually. You could get very low on the ground and, you know, tilt your camera.
Right.
Oh, they're running around.
Okay, well, I have others, but that's enough for me. You can have other people share. And let me figure out if I can get back on and stop sharing. There we go.
Awesome. Yeah, so should I share a couple of photos that I just took outside? Let me see. Hopefully nothing bad will happen. Let's see. Come on. Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is one of the baits that we just saw outside. Just, you know, I want to show you like the difference between the lenses that I use. So this is just a regular iPhone camera. And then this one is using a macro lens. And yeah, so I think this is like the highest magnification, and this is a slightly lower magnification. So I have two different cameras there with two different macro lenses. But anyway, if you have more time, you could kind of play with it with the light and everything, and then it looks even nicer. But you could see that the details are pretty nice. And much faster than getting your real camera out with flash and everything. This is the pavement ant. The first one was the velvety tree ant, and this is the pavement ant that I had on a different bait. So using one lens, and then this one is using the higher magnification of the macro lens. So you can get to see some nice details. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share for now.
Okay, I have a photo from Chen Young to share. So Chen Young, I didn't know if you had anything to say about this.
Like this Camponotus in the chat.
I can speak for him if you want. But yeah, he's talking in the chat. They're
okay.
Camponotus USCAO2, which are I think the largest ants in North America. They haven't really been given a proper species name either, but yeah, they're really big carpenter ants.
Great. I think we're just about at time. I don't know if people want to keep going or if we want to sort of wrap this up and.
Yeah, you know what I did? I couldn't. I couldn't work on my screen every time everybody else was showing something, so I couldn't quite figure out how to put things on my screen to show in the way I wanted to. But I sent them to Marav on your email.
Oh, okay. Let me check it out.
So, oops, excuse me.
Well, for those of you who have to go, thank you so much for joining us. I think this was a pretty cool event. Sorry about any technical issues. I think we've all learned a lot. And if you're interested in doing something, like this again, send me an email. If it seems like people are up to it, we'll see what else we can set up. And at the very least, we hope that by September we can have something, approaching a normal volunteer experience out in the field again.
I hope so.
Thank you, Rob. Bye-bye. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did get these photos. Let me see if I could share them.
So we'll just keep going for a while, but if you need to hop off, we aren't, this is the main part of the program is over. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I think this was almost as fun as, doing this in person. It was really fun to see everyone and, looking for ants and minus the ticks and poison oak and, rattlesnakes.
Thank you.
Which, we all like, but sometimes it's nice. Yeah, I had to remove that slide from the presentation. There's a big slide about poison oak and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, we don't need that today. So yeah, let me share my screen again.
I will email you a couple photos because I'm curious to see if you might be able to figure out what they are.
Okay, so these are the photos that I got from Rebecca, I think. So this is a carpenter ant. Would you like to say something about them?
Yeah, well, that's a carpenter ant that comes inside our house all the time. I don't know what species it is, but we find it solo roaming through the kitchen usually, so occasionally other places, usually the bathroom. I thought maybe it had something to do with water. I don't know, but I think I've also seen them come out of electrical outlets. So I think they're in our walls or somewhere.
Interesting. So as I mentioned, often carpenter ants would have a small nest behind a cabinet or something like that in wood. They don't cause too much damage to the wood, and usually the nests are pretty small. So, you could always try and find them and, I don't know, use bait. So people who really need to kill their ants, using bait is usually the best option. So some sugary bait might work, but I just ignore my ants and,
they really liked the pumpkin pie I left out.
Well, it's good to know their preferences.
Right.
So there's another photo of the carpenter ant.
Yes.
And then this photo is kind of cute.
Okay, so the photo on the white page that was my bait sheet. And I'm not even sure this was an ant. It does have wings. If I don't know if you can bring it up. It might. It was so tiny. This was only about barely more than a millimeter long. So I don't even know if it was an ant, but it didn't fly away. It kind of hopped around when I would try and I'd lift the edge of the page and it would flip back in toward the center so that I could try and photograph it. I couldn't tell. I don't know if you can enlarge it.
Yeah, so I think if I enlarge it more, then it will be too blurry.
Yeah,
you could see it better now. But anyway, it's not an ant. It's some sort of a wasp. I have no idea which one. But the way to tell, so first it has wings, and only the queens and males at some point will have wings with ants, and then but that's fine. I mean, some ants do have wings, but it has this very round head, which is totally uncharacteristic of ants and is a characteristic of wasps. This very round head. Ants usually have a head that is more pointy, and then the antenna, you can see they're kind of straight, and they don't.
Right, they look too straight. Yeah, they did look too straight, but it was so small I could hardly see what I was
Yeah.
looking at.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Just look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you could tell that it's a wasp and not an ant. But
So-
often, I mean, there's some wasps really look like ants. They behave like ants. Some spiders might confuse you, you know. It's
Mhm.
pretty amazing.
So I have another comment, which was just because I'm talking, but it's not about my pictures. It's about the picture with the smaller ant that you said might be a crazy ant or a smaller worker. But like on the ants that are on the screen here on your blue, the ones that are behind the one there, all the at the end, they're all tipping down. But when we had that other one up on the screen, it's Gaster was it was pointing toward the back in a point. So would that feature actually maybe change as an ant gets older and larger, or what does that really indicate that it was a different ant? And it wasn't mine, so I don't know if it can come back.
Yeah, so I could actually show a different thing that would probably help us a bit. So first to your question, so ants don't change, or insect in general. We're looking at the adult insect here. It's just like a butterfly. They have a complete metamorphosis, meaning that you have an egg, larva, pupa stage, and then you have the adult, and they don't molt anymore. So once you have the adult ant, they won't change. They just would look like that. The only thing that would change is that, you know, if they lose a leg or something like that, but also if they eat a lot of liquid food, then their abdomen, the gaster might stretch, and then you'll see these stripes. But the body in general won't change. And what we do see is that, yeah, some of them are pointy. You know, if you look at...
can you enlarge that? Perfect.
Yeah. Well, we could just go to presentation,
Well,
but
see, just right here, like if you look at the Tapenoma, it has a pointy end, and if you look at the Veromosaur, it goes down, and you don't
I
see
agree, and that's a very good characteristic that would help us separate them into subfamilies. So ants are a family, and it divides into quite a few subfamilies. And then each of these subfamilies look a bit different. And I think having a pointy abdomen or gaster here is a very good characteristic. Okay, so this is carpenter ant, winter ant. They all belong to the Formicine subfamily. So they all have this pointy. Also, the crazy ant. So just from your question, okay? It's all pointy. And then if we look at Myrmicine ants, so this one is slightly different, but it's still a Myrmicine. They have this very round abdomen here and here and here, okay? And this one, very round. And even their head is either boxy, like square, or a bit round. It's not as pointy as these ants would be. Also Formica, okay? Two different Formica species. And I think I might have a slide for that. Let's see. Because I didn't use all, you know, the regular slides. I want to kind of remove some things and focus on other things this time. But when we do the regular training, I incorporated this part. Oh, maybe this one. So here you can see the different most common subfamilies. So this is called Myrmicine. The name is here. And they are the ones that have the two different sections here, the petiole and the postpetiole. But they usually have a very round abdomen and somewhat round head. And then this one is a Formicine, okay? Just like the carpenter ant. This is actually a honeypot ant, probably. And they have this very pointy abdomen. So it's a very good characteristic.
It points down more.
Yeah.
Or if you saw it from above, it might not look pointy, right? Or
yeah, depending on the species, I think. And the way you see them. But yeah, in general, I would say that they have very pointy abdomen and pointy head.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, great question. Yeah, if you have other questions about ant ID or anything like that, I mean, there's so much. And if we choose to do this again, we could talk. Let me stop sharing. we could talk about ants, you know, natural history, which is always really fun, and we don't get to do that because we have so much to cover. Even today, when we didn't really need to teach you how to identify everything specifically, I did want to get all these different species in, but I think it could be fun to do another event like this or in person one day and talk about ant biology, which is fascinating. It's a very diverse group. There are about 15,000 different species, and they have different life history, you know, strategies, and very interesting things. So
I have one other question too, which is I captured one carpenter ant a few days ago, and it's still alive this morning, but I noticed its gaster, I think it's on the gaster, yeah, that it's kind of deflated. Is that because it's thirsty, or I mean, it seems like it has an indent in it. And is that because it's too dry, or it's not doing well, or is that a characteristic?
I would guess that they just got hit by something. You know, usually when you see insects out, they'll be intact, but sometimes, you know, ants, especially because they fight and stuff, they might lose a leg, they might get hurt by something. Sometimes because you collected it, you harmed it in a way. With the aspirator, you could harm an insect. Yeah, it could be that, but you could feed it. You could give it some sugar water and see what happens.
Okay.
And it will be happy anyway.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
So unless somebody else wants to go, I would love to share a couple pictures from my bait.
Yes.
Hopefully I've got lots of screens open, but let's see here. That's the big head. It's hard, and it's
got a fight so
tiny.
So cute.
And then I've got just a few more, and I don't know who they are.
Oh. Okay, it looks like a Tapinoma to me, Odorous house ant.
Oh, I didn't smell it. Oh.
Yes, so next time try and smell it. But let's look at it for a second.
Okay.
Could you put it back? Yeah, thanks. So, because this is, I mean, it's a great photo, right? It's not very sharp, but still you could see everything. So you could see kind of pointy head, slightly pointy abdomen. So Tapinoma belongs to a different subfamily. Dolichodorine, I don't know how to pronounce it in American English, whatever. But the interesting thing about them is that they don't have that like middle, like the tiny little parts, the petiole and the postpetiole. They actually have just one section there that is very tiny, and you can't see it because it's hidden between the thorax and the abdomen. So it seems like they don't have anything there.
Yeah, like a solid.
So that's a good characteristic. The other thing, they kind of look to me like a shortened Argentine ant, like you take an Argentine ant and you compress it. So yeah, and they're darker than Argentine ant. It's almost black or black.
Okay.
Yeah, cute and very small.
There.
Nice.
It's different, yeah. Let's move to that one. This was on a hose, and I didn't get it because it was moving so fast, but it was tiny. I mean, it was smaller than I think of a Argentine.
Okay. Yeah, so the thing with these ants, you know, sometimes it's easy if you see the ant, it's really easy to tell what it is, but then from a photo, sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah.
I would guess this is also the crazy ant, but it's difficult for me to say for sure. I mean, the body shape is very similar to a winter ant. It could be a smaller winter ant, but then you said it's so tiny, then it's probably the crazy ant.
It was moving like crazy. I forgot. Is that
Marav, isn't there hairs on the gaster? I think I see up at the near the leg.
Exactly. And I think I see that. So yeah, they have these long, bizarre hairs. I could share that photo again, or you could just Google it later.
Another one that has hairs.
Oh, yay.
You
have all these invasive species and you have big-headed ant. Yeah. So this is probably the pavement ant, the Tremorium.
Okay.
They're kind of stiff. They look like soldiers with a really strong body. What's that?
So
The same?
it's probably the same, but
Okay.
then this one looked different to me, but maybe it's just the angle. See all the different little points on its
Yeah.
wheels, or it looks more, but maybe it's just the angle. You can see those. Do you think that's the same?
I think that would be the same, yeah.
Okay.
But on the same bait, you might have more than one species, as you saw in my photos. Usually one species would take over, but then, you know, and then you get to the behavioral aspect, which is really interesting, because some species would just take over and, you know, bring lots of workers and control the resource. But then other species, like the tiny tetramorium I had there, would kind of sneak behind the other workers and try and grab something small without provoking too much, you know, getting too much attention.
But you know, this point, I don't know if you see my cursor, is that something?
Yeah, I see that. I would still think that's tetramorium. And what I usually do when I'm like, oh, I'm not sure about that, I would just Google that species, and then you could see like different, like photos from different angles.
Okay.
But they also have these little, forgot what they're called, but at the end of the thorax, they have these little spines.
Spines.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's definitely got hairs on its.
Yeah, but then most ants have hairs. It's just depending on like how many hairs and how long and all that stuff. This one looks to me like a winter ant, but yeah.
That's too hairy.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so hairy, so you know, it's kind of difficult to tell. They could be this one, and the next one might be the crazy ants.
That looks crazy to me.
Well, so the only ants that were, I had several baits that had both cat food and sugar water, and this is the only cat food one that had any attention to it. So that was interesting, I thought. But.
Yeah, so different species would go for different baits, as I mentioned before. Like some would prefer the oily or sugary or protein bait. So it's always good to have two different things, to have maybe, you know, sugar or honey or something like that, and then some protein.
Thank you.
That was great. So I have some photos from Bradley, Chen Young, and Joss, and then probably I'm going to have to go after that, but let me share some of those. So this is the breast of Chen Young's. There's two more pictures. Well, 2 pictures total.
Cool.
You guys that raise ants have some amazing pictures.
Yeah, wow. Look at that. So the thing in the middle is the cocoon. So some ants, some formicine ants, but these are 2 queens. That's quite bizarre. So the thing in the middle is a cocoon. So some ants, the formicine ants, they make a cocoon like a butterfly or a moth, where the pupa is inside. And then the little things are larvae. Very cool, or eggs.
All right, and then let me get the last, let's see. Bradley has a couple photos here. This looks like another little set of colony ants, maybe?
Yeah, each one is a different queen with her brood. Cool.
Maybe a different.
Is that a Pogo no Myrmex?
Yeah, looks like it.
Let's see if I can get, the last one's from Joss. What I'm getting from this is that we should probably have another session that's just sharing of photos.
Yeah, because I have, you know, tens of thousands of ones that I'm happy to share with you right now, but it might be too much.
Yeah, so I don't know if Joss has anything to say about any of these, but there's like 3 photos here.
It looks like a velvety tree ant.
Yeah, Lamatoba.
This is just a random ant that I had found in my backyard. I've never seen one particularly like this, and it just sort of popped in front of me, so I captured it just to take some few photos and then let it go.
Well, it's a great photo, and it's a velvety tree ant. And it's a great ant to have in your backyard.
Thank you. Looks nice.
Oh yeah, it's perfect. All right, thank you.
Can I put in a real quick plug? So I work with Grassroots Ecology, and we're doing Exploring Nature Near You once a month on a Saturday, where people come together and do this kind of thing using iNaturalist, and Marav has helped with some of them, and we want to do an ant one sometime. So you can send me an email at claire@grassrootsecology.org, or just check out our website to figure out when those are.
Thanks, Clara. And yeah, we actually talked about doing something similar together, right? Because I have a large group of volunteers that help with my BioBlitz events, and I would like to offer something similar to my volunteers. I think it's really fun, and yeah, it was really fun today.
Several of our California Naturalist alumni here today.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many.
What an overlap of all of our programs.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. So I think we're going to send out a link once we figure out how to post the video. And then we'll try to put any other links that we shared that in that email. And then if anyone else has anything else that they want to send me, feel free to, and I can share that in that. I'm trying to put everything together so I'm not sending everyone multiple emails.
Can I do a quick screen share? I have a question.
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll see if I can get these guys up. Here we go. Are we seeing it? Are you up?
Yeah. I'm looking at my photos, but yeah,
Okay.
I see you. Yeah, we're seeing
Okay, can you see what I've got here? I can't tell from screen share. Okay, so I was guessing these are all the same, that this is a Formica. We've got Formica moki. These are about 5 millimeters long. They loved, oh my God, they loved the peanut butter. Here's one where it's got a hairy gaster. So, you know, my first hit on this is it's a Formica, and I brought some in, but I'm not sure that I'm guessing that's the double humped thorax.
Yeah, so that's the thing.
Yeah.
When you look at this photo, you could see it's not a formicine ant, so it doesn't belong to that group with Formica and Camponatus.
And you say that because
they have two.
This has two, that should
two
have
humps
one.
there. Not humps, but they have these two little, the petiole and the postpetiole between the thorax and the abdomen. You have two little segments.
Yes.
And that's something we only see or mostly see in myrmicine ants, which is the like the harvester ant, the pavement ant, and Phenogaster. And
Yeah, these are
I think this is the
Phenogaster.
Phenogaster.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is the first thing, but then also you could see that they have very round, like your ants have a very round abdomen and kind of square head. So that's also helpful. And when you look at formicine ants, like field ants, Formica and Camponatus, then they have this pointy abdomen.
Great.
Have a what abdomen? Oh,
Pointy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I think that's why I changed the presentation. So other than today, in the past few times that we had a presentation, I changed it into the subfamilies. So I tried to group the different species into subfamilies because I think it helps, put them in groups, and then it's like, oh, it looks like this, then it should be one of these species. And today I mixed them all together. So
there's
to make it
definite
more confusing.
There's definite seasonality in our yard. We have, we're seeing, I've never seen them before, but I've never looked particularly hard at this time of the year. So thanks.
Another thing I say is always go out at night and look, because there are different ants out at night.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else wants to share something?
Yeah, I've got one. It's the only ants I've had in the yard in 29 years.
Well, you have an awesome beetle as your photo now.
Chromastocylus?
Yeah, so this is an awesome scarab beetle that is actually associated with ants. They're really interesting.
Yeah, one of my favorites. So let me see if I can share here. Oh.
So while we do that, I'll say something about the beetles. So these beetles, they feed on ants. Sometimes you see them near ant nests. Wow, beautiful photo.
Yeah, my little bait trap. It's like the only ant we've had. When I grew up in my parents' house, we had the black harvester ants, we had the winter ants, and the carpenter ants eating the fence. But this is all I've got, just icky, invasive ants.
Yeah, the Argentine ones, but it's a beautiful photo. Really
Thank
beautiful.
you. Let's see how I get back. Stop share.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
So,
it's awesome.
For all of you who have Argentine ants, it's not hopeless. I got rid of them. There used to be only Argentine ants. Now I have 4 species of native ants and no Argentines.
How did you do that?
Well, I started off with bait traps in places where the Argentine ants were abundant, that were laced with, boric acid. And that killed a lot of the colonies. Then I would watch for colonies moving into the yard. They would move in overnight, and they would often get under the stones. And in the morning, the queens are all on the bottom of the stone. You'd pick up the stone, you put it out in the driveway and smash all the queens. And over time, they just decline, and now they're gone. I don't know if it's done something for the area because, you know, I've gotten reports that the formicas have been as far as, what's his name? He's a docent. Bob Dodge got them in his yard. He was working and one bit him. And well, that's probably the ones I had a number of years ago. They were across the street. They were down below us, and now they're up at your place. So.
Do we help by not watering so much too? Using more?
That's possibly it, you know, but it's really quite interesting that they have gone away.
Maybe they just don't like you, Paul.
What?
Maybe they just don't like you.
My daughter has been fighting them over at her house for years. She has not gotten rid of them, but she used to have trails of Argentine ants that were at least 3 inches wide. Just the whole trail was just enormous. And in the period where she was baiting them in her house, dead ants were in piles everywhere. She's now got it down to little trails, but they keep coming from the neighbors.
Well, I think we're going to probably wind it down, but thanks everybody for coming. So glad. It's a great group, and hopefully for those who have not participated, you'll think about joining us when we can actually do the survey again. Look for emails from Angie with all of the links that we can gather, and hopefully the recording as well, although to be honest, this is my first time recording a session, so we'll see how that turns out, but fingers crossed.
Yeah, it was really fun. I hope we'll do it again.
Yes.
And I really hope we'll see you all in the fall.
Yes. Thank you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
So much.